I always knew I wasn't their favorite, but I never thought they'd actually say it out loud. Not with my suitcase already packed and waiting by the door. My mother didn't cry. My father couldn't even look me in the eye. They just stood there like a jury handing down a verdict. "You chose mediocrity," my mother said. "We can't have that in this family." But I hadn't done anything wrong. I didn't get arrested or lie or cause some huge scandal. All I wanted was a quiet life, a steady job, a simple apartment, and maybe one day, a dog. I didn't need headlines or fancy job titles, but in their world, wanting less made me a failure. In their eyes, choosing peace meant I had no ambition. Nathan stood in the corner the whole time. He didn't say a word, just watched with that blank look on his face, wearing a designer coat that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. He used to be the one who helped me with math homework. Now he couldn't even meet my eyes. No hug, no goodbye. I walked out of that house with nothing but one bag, and the last shred of self-respect they hadn't managed to crush. That night, I crashed on a friend's couch. I didn't cry until the lights were off and I was alone. The silence felt like a punishment, like I'd been exiled for dreaming too small. Everything looked different the next morning, like the world had been drained of color. But somewhere in that numbness, a quiet voice whispered, "Start over." They erased my name from their legacy, but I was already writing a new one. It's strange how fast people disappear when you're no longer someone to be proud of. One by one, the phone stopped buzzing. The holiday invites stopped coming. Even family friends I'd known since childhood suddenly had nothing to say. I became a ghost with a heartbeat, invisible unless I made noise. But I didn't. I stayed quiet. I knew I had nothing to prove to people who measured worth by status. What hurt the most wasn't the rejection. It was how easily they let me go. Like I was never really part of them in the first place. Like love was just a transaction, and I had failed to pay the price. I kept replaying it in my head. My mother's cold expression, my father's silence, Nathan's indifference. I wondered how long they'd been waiting for a reason to be done with me. But pain has a strange way of sharpening your vision. I started noticing things I had ignored before, the backhanded compliments, the pressure to perform, the comparisons at every dinner table. I had spent my whole life being told to be more like Nathan, more polished, more ambitious, more impressive. I didn't realize how heavy that mask had been until I finally took it off. The first few months were brutal. I was broke, humiliated, and constantly questioning if I'd made some huge mistake. But I had something now I never had growing up. Freedom. No more walking on eggshells. No more chasing approval like a dog begging for scraps. I was alone, yes. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged to myself. I started picking up odd jobs, deliveries, clerical work, even cleaned houses for a while. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me going. I'd wake up before sunrise, walk to the bus stop with coffee and a chipped thermos, and remind myself that survival was still a form of defiance. Every dollar I earned, every rent check I managed to pay on time, felt like a quiet victory no one else could see. And that was okay. I wasn't doing this for applause. Sometimes I'd see Nathan's face in the news, charity galas, tech conferences, luxury cars. My parents beamed beside him like royalty, as if their legacy had been secured. Not once did they mention me. It was as if I had never existed. I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. But I refused to let their silence define me. I didn't need their headlines. I needed peace, and maybe a future I could build with my own hands. I found solace in little things. A neighbor who saved me soup in winter. A stranger who returned my dropped wallet with everything still inside. The smell of fresh laundry drying on the radiator. These were the moments that reminded me I wasn't broken, just rebuilding. And in some strange way, I was grateful. Because losing everything had stripped me bare, but it also gave me space to grow without their shadow looming over me. I didn't know it yet, but rock bottom was turning into a foundation. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was learning, watching, planning. And even though they had shut the door on me with finality, I could feel something shifting inside me. Like the first quiet crack in a wall. No, I didn't want revenge. Not yet. but I never forgot how it felt to be thrown away like I didn't matter. No one was watching, and honestly, that's what made it beautiful. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I just wanted to build something of my own, something quiet, solid, and mine. I started in logistics, taking on freelance contracts that others thought were beneath them. I learned everything from the ground up: how to negotiate, how to handle supply chains, how to survive in a room full of people who underestimated me. While others posted filtered victories online, I was working 12-hour days and sleeping 4 hours a night. I didn't have time to stage my life for strangers. I had numbers to hit, trucks to reroute, clients to win over. There were moments I felt invisible, like the world had forgotten me. But slowly, something started to change. My income grew. So did my confidence. I wasn't just scraping by anymore. I was rising, one quiet contract at a time. By the time I hit my 30s, I owned a logistics company outright. No investors, no family money, just relentless hours and sheer grit. I expanded into storage, then fleet management. Then, almost by accident, I stepped into real estate. Every risk I took was calculated. Every win, earned. Still, I kept it all under the radar. I had seen what fame did to people, especially people like Nathan. Speaking of Nathan, rumors started floating around. Something about shady partnerships, luxury properties tied to offshore accounts, a foundation that didn't quite add up. I didn't go looking for it. The whispers just found me. I kept my distance, lips sealed, even when I wanted to scream. I told myself I wasn't interested in vengeance. Not yet. But deep down, I remembered every insult, every door slammed in my face, and I was listening. I didn't need anyone to clap for me. I wasn't chasing gold stars anymore. I had learned early on that applause is just noise, and noise fades. What I wanted was security, freedom, control over my own name. While Nathan posed for glossy magazine covers, I was sitting across boardroom tables with people who didn't care about my past, only about the numbers I delivered. And I delivered. There was a strange peace in knowing I owed them nothing. Not a phone call, not an update, not even a holiday card. They had erased me so thoroughly that sometimes I wondered if they ever sat around that long dining table and mentioned my name. Probably not. I was the girl who embarrassed them by choosing small, but small had grown into something they'd never see coming. I lived modestly despite what I could afford. One-bedroom condo, mid-range car, no designer handbags. I invested quietly, played the long game, and paid attention to the cracks in the world my family worshipped. I saw people like them crumble every day, people who lived for appearance and ran from consequence. And Nathan? He was burning through money like it was infinite, surrounding himself with the kind of people who vanish the second trouble hits. Still, I said nothing. I watched, listened, and waited. Not with bitterness, but with precision. There's a power in patience that no one teaches you when you grow up in a house obsessed with shortcuts. And I had become very, very patient. I didn't need to chase karma. I just needed to stay the course. Because deep down, I knew the truth. They crowned the wrong child. I was just waiting for the kingdom to collapse. There were days I imagined what I'd say if they ever came back. Not out of fantasy, but as a way to stay grounded. I'd picture my mother dialing my number, her voice trembling, pretending nothing ever happened. Or my father writing some cold formal email, laced with forced pride and veiled need. I never let those scenes last too long. I had no desire to rewrite history. I just didn't want to be caught off guard if it ever happened. I spent my evenings walking through neighborhoods I once thought were out of reach, not to flaunt, but to dream. I'd look at buildings and wonder what stories they held, what kind of lives unfolded behind those tall windows. Real estate became more than investment. It became a symbol of permanence, of presence, of taking up space in a world that once told me to disappear. I bought properties quietly, anonymously, let them wonder who the hell was behind the name on the paperwork. My circle was small, intentionally. People who didn't care where I came from or what my family thought of me. People who saw my worth without needing a resume or a pedigree. Some of them had stories like mine, others just respected the grind. And in that quiet community, I felt something I'd never known before, belonging without performance. I wasn't earning affection. I was simply being, and that was enough. Still, every time I passed a newsstand and saw Nathan's face on another glossy spread, a flicker would light up in my chest. Not jealousy, not anger, just awareness. Like the universe was whispering, "Don't forget." And I didn't. I remembered everything. Every cold shoulder. Every name they called me. Every time they laughed while I disappeared. I wasn't chasing revenge, not then, but the fire was already lit. The call came on a Tuesday, middle of the day. I almost didn't pick up. The number wasn't saved, but something told me to answer. My mother's voice hit me like cold air. Shaky, unfamiliar. For a second, I thought she had the wrong person. "Marie," she said, dragging out my name like it hurt. We need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, silent. Let her sit in the discomfort she never gave me. Nathan had been arrested that morning. Fraud, embezzlement, something about offshore accounts and forged contracts. I didn't catch every detail. She was crying too hard. All I heard clearly was, "We didn't know." But they had known. Maybe not the exact crimes, but the extravagance, the recklessness, the lies. They saw it and called it brilliance. Now their rising star had fallen hard, and they had no one else left. Their assets were frozen. Their reputation? In shambles. Friends weren't returning calls. The house might be repossessed. And somehow in all this collapse, they remembered I existed. My mother actually said, "You were always the sensible one. We need your help. Please." It was almost comical. The same woman who once called me a disgrace now needed me to clean up her mess. The irony was thick enough to taste. I didn't give her an answer right away. I said I needed time to think. I hung up, turned off my phone, and just stared out the window for a long time. There was no joy in their fall, not really. But there was something satisfying in the symmetry. After all these years, they had come crawling. Not with apologies, not with remorse, just desperation in their voices. And I smiled, not because I was cruel, but because they had finally felt the cold. I met with them a few days later, not in secret, no rushed phone calls or quiet back doors. I made them wait. And when I did walk in, I made sure it was on my terms. Neutral cafe, middle of town, plenty of windows. I wore navy, sharp, clean, unreadable. They looked smaller than I remembered. My father's suit was wrinkled. My mother's makeup couldn't cover the panic. And Nathan? He wasn't even there, probably already lawyering up. They thanked me like I was a stranger doing them a favor. My mother held my hand like we hadn't spent a decade pretending I didn't exist. My father tried to maintain some dignity, but even he couldn't hide the cracks. They talked about the situation, about what they stood to lose, about how this was a misunderstanding. They danced around the truth like it was a snake coiled in the center of the table. I listened. I nodded. I even gave them a soft smile. Practiced, polite, almost sweet. I said, "Of course, let me handle it all." And they relaxed, just like that. The arrogance returned in tiny flashes, as if help from me was just the natural order of things, as if I owed them this. But inside, I was already miles ahead. This wasn't help. This was the setup. They had no idea the storm I was preparing behind those calm eyes. That night, I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving. Not for celebration, for clarity. I sat in my kitchen and started gathering everything. Old voicemails, emails, letters, blocked messages. Proof of their rejection. Proof of their cruelty. I wasn't going to scream or seek revenge with fire and fury. No. I was going to let the truth speak for itself, and I would let it speak in public. I remembered every detail of the day they cut me off, the exact words, the way the front door closed behind me like a final sentence. So when I started organizing the files, I wasn't just collecting proof, I was reclaiming my voice. Emails from my mother calling me a parasite. Legal letters denying me my share of the inheritance. Birthday cards never sent. Whole chapters of my life they tried to erase, now documented in black and white. They wanted help? They would get it. just not the kind they expected. I wasn't going to scream or fight. That would have been too easy for them to dismiss. No, I needed silence and strategy. I needed the moment to land with the kind of weight that couldn't be brushed off. I wanted them to realize that the daughter they discarded had become someone they couldn't ignore, and someone they would never control again. People like them don't break all at once. They crack in silence first. Tiny shifts in expression. A stutter. A tremor in the hand. That's what I wanted to see. Not a scene, but a slow unraveling. And I wanted it where the world could watch. Former friends, distant relatives, even the press that once printed Nathan's name in gold ink. I didn't want revenge in the shadows. I wanted the spotlight, for once, on me. They thought they were about to be rescued, that I would sweep in and restore everything they'd lost, that their shame would be buried quietly and their egos salvaged. But what they didn't know was this. They had already stepped into the trap, and I wasn't going to lift them out of the hole they'd dug. I was going to hand them the shovel. I picked the cafe carefully. Not too loud, not too hidden. The kind of place where old family friends like to linger over cappuccinos and gossip in lowered voices. I made the reservation under their name. Let the staff know we'd need a larger table. Then I sat back and let the word spread. A few texts, a hint dropped here and there, just enough to guarantee the right people would be present. People who remembered me. People who watched me leave all those years ago in silence. They arrived early like I knew they would. Dressed like they still had something to protect. My mother even wore pearls. My father pulled out a chair for me, awkwardly trying to appear composed. They looked hopeful, the kind of desperate hope that clings to fantasy. They had no idea what was coming. I walked in calmly, with a leather folder tucked under my arm. Smiling like this was just another family catch-up. They had no idea that this was the reckoning. I let them talk first. Let them thank me again, flatter me with empty words. My mother squeezed my hand, called me an angel. My father nodded solemnly, said how proud they were that I'd done so well for myself. I waited until the waiter brought the drinks, until the background noise softened, and then I placed the folder on the table and opened it, one page at a time, like peeling back skin. Their smiles didn't fade all at once. They disintegrated. First was the email, the one where my mother called me dead weight and a shameful mistake. Next came the legal documents, the inheritance denial, then printouts of birthday reminders never sent, and voicemail transcriptions they thought I'd deleted. And on top of it all, a simple note typed in bold, repayment denied. My mother blinked like she hadn't read it right. My father just stared. And I finally spoke, not with anger, but with clarity. You made your choice, I said, my voice steady, low, but loud enough. I didn't have to yell. The quiet hurt more. And now you can live with it, just like I had to. My mother's hand dropped from mine like it had been burned. My father leaned back, his jaw tight, but he didn't say a word. Around us, I could feel the shift, heads subtly turning, whispers beginning, forks pausing midair. Good. Let them listen. For once, I wanted them to feel the weight of their own words. Not in private, not behind closed doors where apologies are whispered and rewritten. I wanted truth to echo. The woman they'd disowned had returned, not for a reunion, but for a reckoning. I wanted them to know that every ounce of their pride, their obsession with image, their need for perfection, it had all led here, to this moment, this humiliation, this justice. My mother started to speak, some breathless stammer of defense, but I raised my hand, not in aggression, just finality. No, I said, you don't get to rewrite the story now. And that was it. I closed the folder, slid it across the table, and stood up. My heart was pounding, but I didn't let it show. There was no going back, no half measures. I wasn't there to heal old wounds. I was there to make sure they never forgot who held the scalpel. They sat frozen, like they couldn't believe what just happened. But it had. I made sure of it. Around us, The cafe had gone strangely quiet. No one intervened. No one spoke. It was like time had stopped for them, the royalty stripped of their crown in front of an audience, and as I walked toward the exit, I didn't rush. I wanted them to watch me go, just like they once did. Only this time, I wasn't the one being abandoned. I didn't look back. Not even once. There was no need. I already knew what I'd see. Two people sitting in their own wreckage, stunned that the daughter they threw away had the strength to walk back in, only to leave again on her own terms. No begging, no second chances, just truth laid bare like bones in the sun. For so long, they had counted on silence to protect them. Today, silence betrayed them. As I stepped outside, the light felt different, warmer somehow, cleaner. I breathed in slowly, taking in the sounds of the street, the distant clinking of silverware behind me, the murmurs still buzzing inside the cafe. Let them talk, let the story spread. I didn't need to explain myself. The file had done that for me. And every whispered conversation that followed would only amplify what they had tried so hard to bury. I had rehearsed so many versions of that confrontation in my head. Angry ones, tearful ones, vengeful monologues with dramatic exits. But when the moment finally came, all I needed was the truth, delivered plainly, unapologetically. That was the most powerful part. I didn't have to scream to be heard. I didn't need revenge to win. All I had to do was stand, and let them fall under the weight of what they'd done. I crossed the street without looking back. My hands were steady, my breath calm. I had nothing left to prove, not to them, not to anyone. I didn't leave them with a cent. I didn't leave them with a shred of dignity either. And for the first time in years, I felt free. They thought they'd meet their savior that day. Instead, they met their consequence. The story spread faster than I expected. A few whispers turned into conversations. Conversations turned into online threads. Soon, people who once looked through me were looking at me, with curiosity, sometimes awe, and once in a while, even apology. I didn't need their admiration, but I accepted it. Not out of pride, but because it proved something I already knew. Truth doesn't need an invitation. It finds its way in. Women I hadn't seen in years started reaching out. Some were old classmates. Others, strangers who'd heard about what happened at the cafe. They didn't come with gossip. They came with their own wounds. Rejection, betrayal, silence. I listened. I showed up. I invested in their ideas, mentored where I could, partnered where it made sense. It felt good to lift others, not out of some savior complex, but because I remembered how it felt to have no one. Meanwhile, my parents faded into a different kind of story. Their friends stopped answering calls. Their social invites dried up. The house was slipping into foreclosure. Nathan was sentenced, 5 years, minimum. No more headlines, no more designer suits or charity galas, just orange jumpsuits and courtroom photos. Every time someone sent me a news link, I didn't open it. I already knew how it ended for them. I didn't need to see it to believe it. And then one day, I did something no one expected. Not even me. I bought the house, the one they cast me out of. Not to live in it. Not to renovate it. I bought it under my company's name. No announcement, no press release, just a silent transaction. The keys handed to me without fanfare. I stood on that front porch one last time, staring at the door that once closed on me. And I knew exactly what I would do next. I had the house demolished. Not out of rage, I wasn't interested in drama. I stood across the street with a warm coffee in hand and watched the machines take it apart, brick by brick, memory by memory. It wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. That place had been a monument to everything I wasn't allowed to be. Now, it would be something better. Something useful. Something healing. In its place, I built a community center. A space for women who had been told they weren't enough. For girls who were silenced, pushed aside, underestimated. It had classrooms, counseling rooms, a daycare, a kitchen for cooking classes, and walls filled with laughter instead of judgment. I didn't put my name on the building. That wasn't the point. I just wanted it to exist. Something good born from something cruel. Sometimes I'd visit on weekends, quietly slipping in during book clubs or after-school programs, watching women grow businesses out of tiny ideas, seeing single mothers find rest in a room built for them. It was the kind of success I could never explain to the people who once shamed me for dreaming small. And that's what made it beautiful. It wasn't loud. It wasn't viral. It was real. My parents never tried to contact me again. I don't know where they live now. Somewhere quiet, I imagine, where no one recognizes them. Their world shrank the way mine expanded, and I felt no anger, only distance, because I had taken the one thing they valued most, legacy, and rewrote it without their permission. And somehow, that felt more powerful than any revenge I could have planned. There's a strange peace in knowing you don't need anyone to lose for you to win. My success wasn't built on their failure. It was built in spite of it, and that made it unshakable. People ask if I ever regret cutting them off, if I miss them, if I wish things had been different. And the truth is, I don't. Because wishing doesn't change what happened, and longing doesn't rebuild what never truly existed. What I do feel is gratitude, not for their cruelty, but for what it taught me. I learned how to survive without applause, how to build without praise, how to stand alone and still feel whole. Most people spend their whole lives trying to prove they're enough. I stopped trying the day they turned their backs. And ironically, that's when I started becoming everything they said I couldn't be. Sometimes, I drive by the community center late at night, when the windows are glowing and the halls are still humming with energy. I don't stop. I don't go inside. I just watch for a moment and smile. Because that space, that laughter, that warmth, that hope, it was never meant for them. It was meant for every girl like me who was told to shrink, to stay quiet, to aim lower. They built a life on pride and exclusion. I ended it with dignity and a bulldozer.